For 300 years, European kings poured their treasuries into finding a single city somewhere in South America. Thousands of soldiers marched into this jungle, and whole armadas were swallowed by starvation, disease, and warfare to claim its streets. Every map drawn and every life lost in that jungle was spent chasing a phantom. The city they were looking for never existed. What they were actually chasing was a man, a king, covered head to toe in gold dust. This single detail highlights how easily a localized tradition can mutate. Once unchecked imagination takes hold, it can construct a geographical illusion powerful enough to kill thousands. To understand how this obsession took root, you have to look at the psychological state of early 16th century Europe. Spanish conquistadors had rapidly dismantled the Aztec and Inca empires, sending ships back across the Atlantic heavy with vast quantities of silver, emeralds, and gold. Seeing this sudden influx of wealth warped the continent's logic. If two advanced, incredibly wealthy civilizations existed hidden in this new world, people assumed it was a mathematical certainty that a third one was out there waiting to be plundered. When ships docked in Spanish ports, sailors brought stories with them. Whispers in taverns about mountain kingdoms and golden temples merged with every retelling. Eventually, all these scattered rumors collapsed into a single, irresistible name: El Dorado. The legend swept eastward, driven entirely by the momentum of recent conquests. The continent had tasted imperial success, and that appetite alone was enough to map a myth into reality. The actual origin of this myth lies high in the Andes Mountains of modern-day Colombia, with the Muisca people. Look at this intricate metalwork. The Muisca were a highly advanced society, and gold played a central role in their culture, not as currency, but as a spiritual conduit. When it was time to crown a new leader, they held a highly specific ceremony. The incoming ruler was stripped down, his skin coated in sticky tree resin. Priests would blow fine gold dust across his body until completely covered. Glowing under the morning sun, the new king would step onto a ceremonial raft. Surrounded by priests carrying emeralds and gold ornaments, he drifted out toward the center of this isolated crater lake, Lake Guatavita. At the center, the priests threw their ornaments into the dark water as offerings to the gods. Then, the Golden King dove in, swimming until every speck of dust had washed away from his skin. For the Muisca, this was a moment of profound spiritual devotion. But when fractured accounts of this ritual finally reached the Spanish, the spiritual context was erased. Explorers heard only of a society so unimaginably rich that their king wore gold as clothing, only to casually wash it off into a lake. Armed with this distorted translation, conquistadors began organizing massive military expeditions. Men like Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada marched hundreds of heavily armed soldiers into the punishing high-altitude terrain and deadly swamps of Muisca territory. The desperation to find this city pushed explorers to extreme lengths. Francisco de Orellana led a detachment eastward through the jungle in search of the mythical kingdom. His expedition became trapped by river currents, forcing him to navigate the entire length of the Amazon River by sheer accident. Look at this early map of South America. The vast, unmapped center of the continent became a blank canvas for European projection. When expeditions returned empty-handed, they didn't conclude the city was a myth. They simply assumed they hadn't tracked far enough, moving the target slightly deeper into the wilderness. The geography itself became the trap. The terrifying scale of the Amazon basin provided endless room for the myth to hide, converting every physical failure into psychological fuel for the next expedition. Decades passed, and the compulsion spread beyond Spain. By the late 16th century, the English explorer Sir Walter Raleigh became entirely consumed by the idea of finding the Golden King. Raleigh led his first expedition in 1595. He found traces of gold ore in the jungle, but no sprawling metropolis. Unwilling to let the dream die, he organized a second, desperate attempt in 1617, explicitly against the orders of the English crown. That final expedition dissolved into chaos. His men engaged in a bloody clash with Spanish forces, a battle that cost Raleigh the life of his own son. He returned to London empty-handed, and King James ordered his execution for treason. A localized indigenous ritual from the Colombian highlands had generated a phantom powerful enough to reach across the Atlantic Ocean and claim the life of one of England's most famous statesmen. Even into the 1800s, the fixation remained. Multiple industrial expeditions literally attempted to carve trenches into the sides of Lake Guatavita, hoping to drain the water completely and expose centuries of discarded offerings. The physical proof of the legend didn't surface until 1969, when local farmers found this inside a cave near Bogota, the Muisca Raft. Cast entirely in gold centuries before the Spanish arrived, it depicts the precise coronation ceremony, the priests, the ornaments, and the towering central figure of the Golden King on his raft. While the raft sat silently in a cave, thousands of men died searching for a city that notched it. Over 3 centuries, entire armadas vanished into the rainforest, succumbing to starvation, disease, and constant warfare. The illusion survived the centuries by operating on a sliding scale. Whenever a patch of jungle was mapped and found empty, the myth simply relocated to the next uncharted riverbend. So why do we still dissect the story of El Dorado 500 years later? The Muisca people never actually promised anyone a golden empire. European explorers constructed that metropolis themselves, cementing it together with mistranslations and a blinding sense of entitlement. The explorers scoured a continent for centuries, fighting and dying for an illusion, while the actual truth they were looking for was resting quietly at the bottom of a lake the entire time. The search for El Dorado stands as a monument to human psychology. It shows exactly what happens when greed and imagination are left unchecked to rewrite reality. If you enjoyed uncovering this piece of history, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video.